goes. More on that story. Gannon's body was found in a suitcase underneath a bridge in Florida by a construction worker back in 2020. Stauch has pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, she's charged with first-degree murder, child abuse resulting in death, and tampering with evidence. All right, let me bring in my guests for this hour. With me, celebrity civil litigator John Phillips is with me, and trial attorney and celebrity family law attorney and law professor Randy Kessler. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with me this evening. Let's start with the Letecia Stauch case, because we were all wondering where this defense was going in terms of this insanity defense. And John, I'll start with you. It became clear they're going with this personality fragmentation. That was the word he used, and they have an expert lined up to come in and tell this jury all about it. Your thoughts on that defense or that approach?
I mean, you got to go with the best shot you have, right? That is, as a parent, about the hardest case. Even watching the screen, I probably, like your viewers, just had to look away at parts because you just can't imagine a mother doing that to her child. And they're going to try to trump that horror by what happened to her. And I just can't imagine sitting as a juror in that case day after day, week after week, ultimately coming down to the decision of insanity or not.
You know, what's interesting, Randy, during his opening statement, Will Cook, the defense attorney, going by what he read in some of the juror questionnaires, he said he had two big problems. One, as far as they were concerned, he was representing evil. And two, insanity is BS, or insanity is not something that they buy. That certainly sounds like a very tough road to hoe.
I mean, where do you go from there? There's no, I guess there's nowhere but up, right? It can't get much worse than that. But, you know, it's always a bad thing when the argument is not, did she do it, but why did she do it? You know, you've already lost that first. You know, most of the cases, it's proving it, circumstantial evidence. Do we have an eyewitness? Do we have a confession? Do we have a murder weapon? Do we have DNA? You know, we're way beyond that. The only question is, why did she do it? And gosh, you're both right. When it's a mother or a stepmother, I mean, who's gonna excuse it? There are better excuses than what she's going to present, which would not be accepted, you know. But it's maybe sometimes you go to a jury trial because guess what? You're innocent until proven guilty, so she's still innocent as of today, and had she pled guilty, she would have been guilty yesterday. So she's been innocent for one more day in her life.
You know, John, what's interesting, when you're a defense attorney and you're sort of reaching out, and you mentioned it, you kind of work with what you got. And you get a report. You get her examined by a doctor from Yale, apparently, who comes back and says, you know, this woman suffers from multiple personalities. Hey, you take the ball, you run with it. But here's part of the problem. Insanity defense is very difficult because not only, you know, you got these multiple personalities, but it's not just that. Each personality, or whichever one she might have killed under, has to have not understood the difference between right and wrong and not understood what she was doing. So that's an extra step.
That's exactly right. So you've got to convince the judge that this is an insanity case, and then you've got to convince the jurors that this is an insanity case, and then you've got to show that this was an insanity case for each element of a multiple personality. And it's why it's a infinitesimal victory here, you know, for these type cases, but it's just such a horror of facts.
You know, it's interesting, and you talk about infinitesimal. I did some research a while back. I believe it's less than 1% of these insanity cases are actually successful. So when I say tough road to hoe, that sounds like a tough road to hoe. Let's turn now to the Stephen Smith case. Big topic in Low Country. Stephen Smith found on a road. Randy, I got to ask you, what jumps out at me about the Stephen Smith case is that when I hear about the injuries that he suffered, and then you sort of pair that with some of the other facts of what happened, you know, things that fly in the face of the idea that he was hit by a car. We can get into all those things, but at the end of the day, how did that investigation, you think, end up with a conclusion that he was hit by a car when everything seemed to fly in the face of that?
You know, maybe it's the path of least resistance. Maybe it was inept investigators. Who knows? But it's really still going to be hard to get a murder conviction, right? You're still going to have to find that, based on an autopsy, that scientists and investigators and doctors and pathologists all figured out that this is exactly what happened. It sounds like crazy, wild science to try to piece together something well after the fact. It's a CSI or it's a, some sort of major science fiction movie to be able to convict somebody just based on an autopsy. So, sometimes there's capability of two interpretations, and you take the path of least resistance because you can't prove the other, and it brings the family peace. Not saying any of those are right or appropriate, but sometimes you got to put it behind you. And if you're not going to get a conviction, it could be worse trying to get a conviction and failing than not trying. I don't know. I wasn't there, but you're right. Those are. I can't explain why they would have said car accident if they didn't feel pretty darn good it was a car accident. That's I'm searching, I'm reaching here.
Yeah, no question about it. And what's interesting, guys, is anthropologists had to be hired to help with this autopsy because, of course, these forensic anthropologists are familiar with the skeleton, changes in the skeleton, because you got to remember, this is 8-9 years after the event. So what they find there is, there's going to be, I don't know what's left to find, but clearly they think they have, and it's been performed. So we'll be finding out soon. All right, gentlemen, stand by. I do have to take a break. Folks, coming up next, the Doomsday